Stood about 12 inches away from his face. He could feel the breath of whatever it was beating on his face. Today's encounter story is called Terror in the Woods. This story comes to me from a lifelong hunter from northeastern Oklahoma. Now, when I say lifelong, I mean this man has spent every moment in the woods that he can. He hunted from the time that he was old enough to walk. He's been in the woods. On this particular night, he had gone to his hunting property and he got out of his truck and he was wearing 2 different layers because it was quite chilly. Now, despite the fact that he was actually wearing suspenders as well, the inside layer of his pants had ridden down a little bit. So he puts his flashlight in his outer pocket. He reaches into his pants to pull up the second pair of pants. While his hands were inside of his pants, something jumped out of the brush and landed right in front of him. It was pitch black, moonless night. He's not able to see it. All he knew was that it was as tall as he was, or taller, broad and fast. It stood about 12 inches away from his face. He could feel the breath of whatever it was beating on his face. Now, he says he doesn't really remember a smell, and I made sure to ask. He doesn't really know how much time passed during this time, but he stood there with his hands down his pants while this thing stood so close to him. He finally kind of came to, he was in shock, and he finally kind of came to, pulled his hands out of his pants, reached into his outside pocket, grabbed his flashlight, and popped it up. Now, in the time that it took to get his hand out of his pants and get the flashlight up, this thing, whatever it was, had already taken off. So the area that he was in, was cleared of brush, and it was going to be a driveway at one point. The brush on each side was about 10 foot high. Down at the end of the lane, which was about 100 feet down, there was grass. Whenever he popped his flashlight up, he could see the grass still moving at the end of the lane, and it was parted where something had gone through. He doesn't know what it was. All he knows is that it was extremely fast. He thought about it, and he didn't know if it was a deer, a mountain lion, a bear. He was unsure. There was a game trail that came across through the brush right about where it popped out. After he looked and saw that it made it all the way to the end of the clearing, and that in the time that it took to pop up the flashlight, he decided that he didn't need to be there anymore. He turned around, got right back in his truck, and he left. 2 weeks later, he was brave enough to go back to the property just to retrieve his game camera. He took the game camera home and he went through the images. And one of the images, it threw him a little bit. This image was of a creature, a big, dark creature, sitting down, squatted down on the ground, eating feed off of the ground under his feeder. Now, you could say that was a bear, you could say it was a hog, something like that. However, right next to that creature was a giant boulder. This boulder, he says, he had, put his feeder up right next to it. The boulder was around the size of a Volkswagen Bug. This creature was almost as large as this boulder. He did not go back into the woods for over a year. Now, mind you, this is somebody who was in the woods every day since he could remember. This is someone that the woods were his sanctuary. This is where he went to get away from life. And he would not go back into the woods. A friend of his actually called him out on that and said, "Why haven't you been in the woods? Why haven't you been hunting?" And he finally came clean. It took a very long time for him to come clean and tell about his encounter. And his friend said, "Well, that was Bigfoot." And he said, "Oh, no, it was probably a bear or a hog or something." He's like, "It couldn't have been Bigfoot. That's only in the Pacific Northwest anyway, if they even exist." And his friend said, nope, there are Bigfoot in Oklahoma. That was a Bigfoot. He ruminated on that a little bit. He still wasn't a believer. He still couldn't wrap his mind around that. He actually took the picture of the whatever it was squatted down near the feeder, and he had actually gone back to the area and found a print. He took a picture of it. He took the picture and the print, and he has another friend who is a biologist that studies bears. And he showed the man the picture and the picture of the prints. And the man immediately said, that's not a bear. He said, first of all, we don't have any bear in this area. He said, they have not made it to this area. He said, second, I can tell you by looking at those, that is not a bear. This property is landlocked by residential property surrounding it. On one side, the other side is waterfront property to a lake. The owners will not let anybody through except for this hunter. So nobody would have been on that property by the feeder or to jump out and scare this hunter. Especially in northeastern Oklahoma, you would think you would be smart enough not to do that, as you would probably get shot. Whatever it was that jumped out in front of him, he said it was close enough to touch, and that it seemed like it jumped out that close to him on purpose and then just stood there, breathing on him. How he came across this property. He was selling something, and a man approached him about buying whatever he was selling. They got to talking, and the man said, I actually have a property that I was looking to sell. The hunter, of course, is always interested in acquiring more property to go to and hunt. And he said, okay, well, I'd love to see it. He goes and he views the property, ends up buying it. Now, he asked, why are you selling this property? And the man told him, well, my wife had an experience on this property. We were actually going to build a house out here, and it was going to be our residential property. However, my wife had a traumatic experience, and now we have to sell it to be in town, closer to medical facilities. The man asked, the hunter asked what happened. And the man said that they were out there, they were working, trying to get everything ready, and he had to go to town to get some supplies. He left his wife there because she said she wanted to stay and keep working. When he got back from town, he couldn't find her. He looked, and he eventually did find her. She was curled into the fetal position at the base of a tree. She was catatonic and she wouldn't speak. To this day, she's actually still an extreme agoraphobic, and she doesn't venture out of her home, and she has to have medical treatment. So he sold the property to the hunter. This property was worth $1 million. He sold this property to the hunter for $190,000. Such an extreme price cut that the county assessor actually sent a letter to the hunter with words such as coercion, to make sure that the hunter did not coerce this man into selling the property for so cheap. He did not put this together for quite a while after his encounter, until he finally did put that together, and then he mentioned, the Bigfoot thing, and he realized that his encounter might possibly be Bigfoot. To this day, this is something that he still cannot wrap his mind around. He still doesn't want to believe that what he had was a Bigfoot encounter, but it was a life-changing encounter. And to this day, he will not go back in the woods during dark. And this is someone who grew up in the woods. He would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, take his shoes off, go into the woods to his stand, and stay until dark the next day. And now he makes sure that he is out of the woods by dark. That's all for this encounter. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please leave me a like, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on, and let me know what you think in the comments.
Thank you for listening to Nite Terrors. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button and drop a comment below. And don't forget to click the link in the description to send in your encounter story to be featured on an episode of Nite Terrors. Also, you can see what else is going on in the Night Callers world. Thank you, everybody.